All right, guys, welcome to our next edition of Adaptation Fixation. This time we are going to talk about what was at the time the highest grossing video game movie of all time and actually remained that way for quite a while, which is 2001's Lara Croft Tomb Raider. Which is, by the way, that's the official title. It took me a little while when I was looking through it. It's Lara Croft Tomb Raider, I guess. And 2001 is kind of last time we were talking about Double Dragon, we said how they kind of missed, they didn't strike while the iron was hot. This time, I think they got a lot closer to the mark, but it was still a little bit past, I guess, the prime of Tomb Raider, but the character of Lara Croft was, I guess, is really enough of is iconic enough to carry it anyways. It's not like Double Dragon where people don't know it. Like, people knew Lara Croft. Like, she as a video game character was and kind of remains, although not as much a big deal. Yeah, I enjoyed this movie. I think Wolfman didn't enjoy it as much as I did. I think it's, kind of a fun late 90s, early 2000s sort of action, bad CGI piece. It's a step, or maybe a couple steps down from the Mummy movies, but like I feel like kind of in that vein.
It's I don't think it is a good movie. And there were definitely points that I found it to be boring or unsatisfying, but I also look, after Double Dragon, we needed this.
Yeah, we needed something that was at least watchable. Like, yeah, I watched this with my fiance, and she said she said this isn't a bad movie, and I said I agree. We were able to watch it from start to finish. It was fine. I think there's definitely some points of it that are very much of its time.
Yes. Starting with some of the people behind the film.
Oh, go ahead. I'm very much not aware of this. It has an interesting cast, which I didn't really remember most of them.
Yeah. With one in particular, I'm very excited to get to when he comes up. But so it had 5 writers, or rather, it had 5 people credited to its script alongside the director. That includes Sarah B. Cooper, who wrote the wonderfully over-the-top X-Files episode, The Calasari. Michael Collieri and Mike Werb. The two, the former wrote Death Wish 5, The Face of Death, Darkman 3, Die, Darkman, Die, and the latter wrote The Mask.
There was a Darkman 3?
There were. I've seen all 3 of them.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The latter 2 are not that good.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Mike Werb wrote The Mask and something called The Secret of the Ice Cave with Michael Moriarty. 2 of the other writers, Patrick Massett and John Zinman, wrote, or they've done various things, but I guess they're apparently doing a live-action version of Sword Art Online. But Collieri and Werbs worked together on a film that I think is probably really important for this discussion, because they wrote the script for Face Off.
Oh, Face Off. That's a magically 90s movie.
Yeah, an excellent movie. And it was directed by Simon West, who did stuff like The Expendables 2, but is most famous and most relevant for this discussion for being the director of Con Air, the movie in which Nicolas Cage is trapped on board a plane filled with the world's greatest supervillains.
Correct. Including Steve Buscemi.
Yes.
In one of his greatest roles.
Yeah. And yep, Steve Buscemi, Dave Chappelle, Danny Trejo, John Malkovich.
Yeah, and there was I feel like maybe a lot of people probably don't remember, and a lot of younger viewers to the discussion that aren't cinephiles or don't go back might not really realize that, before kind of the modern, I guess it really started with the superhero blockbuster, that everything kind of goes with big budgets, with capes or big IPs, or it's something, or giant transforming robots and what have you. There was a time where there still were so many Hollywood action blockbusters, but they were based off nothing, and they were just mostly, frivolous, ridiculous garbage.
They were based around. It was the last kind of gasp of the full like on 100% world famous movie star in all caps, where like one person, your Nick Cage or your John Travolta or your Angelina Jolie, could basically just kind of their
Carry a
presence
movie.
alone could kind of drive this entire movie. And now,
Yeah,
we have people like that. We like our Robert Downeys, but we don't really. That's not really something that kind of exists that much anymore.
yeah. Just
It,
because The Rock opens Jungle Cruise doesn't mean, with Emily Blunt, doesn't mean that that movie's going to do well. Because people care more about the name and the IP nowadays than they really
yeah,
care about who is starring in it. So yeah, you'd have these big action set piece movies. Yeah, Speed's a great example, and Speed's something that I think a
yes,
lot of people revisit, where you just have an idea. It's basically everything. It's Die Hard, but on this.
yeah, it's
And
one gimmick, and that's all you
exactly,
need. Um,
exactly.
yeah, this
And
is
this kind of falls into that. And like I said, it seems like a bridge between that and when did the first Mummy come out? Because like I felt like it was starting to get to that level.
I'm gonna look right now. So, apologies for some of the button presses you made here, but
Yeah,
um,
like I have a feeling it was very
19,
close. Maybe shortly before, or shortly before,
uh,
maybe because I feel like it was kind of
it was 1999, and that
1999.
also, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
1999, and that fits because again, it's like it is an adaptation, sort of, or rather, it's an attempt to reboot the original like classic Mummy horror
Hmm.
films, but it's really more of just kind of a Brendan Fraser vehicle. Um,
Exactly. And
yeah,
some of the CGI reminded me a lot of the CGI from the Mummy movies. This is not a good movie for CGI.
uh, yeah, this is it came out in 2001, but it is aggressively 1990, late 90s. Like LL
Mhm.
Cool J should be in it. Um,
There is a lot to it. Although I'll say this, I feel like because it was bad CGI, but it was basically, we'll get to it, rock monsters and liquid metal and things that had been done so often that it doesn't look as bad. It's not, if you ever watch Alien 3 and you look at the dog alien, you're like, oh my god, that's awful.
I
Like you can,
mean,
it's everything. It's at least passable. It looks like a PlayStation 3 cutscene.
I
Um,
mean,
that's probably a little too good. Maybe a PlayStation
yeah,
2. But
it's a PlayStation 2 FMV. Like
yeah, exactly.
it,
Which fits because it's Tomb Raider.
it is, yeah. Um, and that's actually something that I find kind of interesting is that we're talking about a film like this is a podcast about video game adaptations, and but it's like these movies aren't just made in the mold of being video game adaptations. They have their own, like, they're responding to other things too. And that's what kind of it makes this movie more interesting for me, is like thinking about it as it's a video game movie, but also like it's very obviously responding to stuff like The Mummy, and I think also Resident Evil. The
I wish I remembered it, but there was definitely a sand joke that made me think of the Star Wars prequels at some point.
yeah,
Like
the
there's a lot. Let's I guess go over really quick just the basic plot.
sure, yeah.
Uh,
Uh,
it'll be really easy to go through. One thing I like about this, and this will lead into the plot, was there's definitely set pieces. It felt very much like a video game to me, which I like.
yes.
It's like, here's a fetch quest, here's some enemies, here's a mini boss. Here
He,
now we're in the desert level, now we're in the snow level, now we're in the
yeah,
jungle level.
here's
Like,
the boss battle that's not actually a boss battle, but you have to fight a bunch of guys in one room.
yeah, and here's the part. Well, like I said, we'll get into it. There's one part in particular where I'm all like, yeah, that was definitely a quick time event that she did to kill that boss. But anyways,
Yes, the longest QuickTime event, but yes.
yeah. So the
Uh,
movie's a slow time event, if you will. So the movie starts with Lara Croft, and not only am I impressed with how this feels like Tomb Raider, and it's cheesy in a way the early Tomb Raiders were, but I feel like a lot of the plot beats match up really well with Rise of the Tomb Raider, which is weird, and I'd like to like just examine that on its own sometime. Like I feel like Rise of the Tomb Raider is like, what do people remember about Lara Croft? What about that movie? Do it. But It starts with Lara Croft fighting a robot, which is
Yeah.
weird. It's super video gamey, but it's like some of the stuff they do in Resident Evil, where it's like, this would make sense in a Resident Evil game, but it's not actually from it. Like I don't remember any point, and I'm sure somebody, because I'm not a huge Tomb Raider fan, and I don't remember a lot about the older games, but I don't remember Lara Croft ever fighting a robot.
And it's not just like a robot, like it's this weird kind of like four-legged thing. You know what? I recently played a Dragon Quest XI Echoes of Elusive Age Definitive Edition, and there are these like giant monsters. They're like sort of robots that are just like kind of like they're sort of metal boxes with like four legs and four arms that just sort of swing swords wildly, and it's kind of like that.
Yeah, so you find out that it's all this really complicated training, like the X-Men Danger Room. It's just to show off all of her skills. And I like how the new games really frame Lara as a survivor and somebody tracking down mysteries and, and someone with some daddy issues, which is the same as the old one and is really driven home by the fact that Angelina Jolie is in this movie, has a whole thing with her dad. Her real life dad, John Voight, who is also Lord Richard Croft. Whole thing, her dealing with daddy issues through this movie. But this one's more like the eccentricities of the idle rich. Like,
yeah,
like if Batman wasn't so like driven by revenge, it's like, well, what? It's like, what is she gonna do? It's so like ridiculous. She's like in this giant mansion. She's there's so much damage that's being set off by this robot. And this is like a regular trading thing for her. You're like, how many millions of dollars do you spend like quarterly cleaning up after this giant robot that fights you? And it's also set definitely to kill. Like there's some close calls. You don't need a trading robot that's actually going to go at you with like spinning, rotating blades of death.
Yeah, I will say that is something I did enjoy about the film, was how like Lara isn't really a particularly moral person in the film, and I kind of enjoyed that. Like she's like there's not really an indication that she's actually does these treasures for much reason other than for either herself or just for very personal reasons. And I kind of enjoyed that.
Because her dad did it and because she's bored. Like literally, she's not she's not a superhero out to save the world. She's like, it's like, and I kind of like this because this is classic Lara. Is that she's like half Indiana Jones, half like classic
Lupin.
Bond. Yeah, like wrapped in like sex pot like exterior, and it's like cheeky and ridiculous. Like she's definitely, it's not like that. Definitely like one of those self-serious things. Like her dad's like, you need to do this to save the world, and throughout it. We'll discuss what the MacGuffin is. But even she's like, but do we really? I really just want to use this for my... She literally has to have like a talk to God moment with her dad where she's selfishly using the treasure where he says, come on, this is exactly what I told you not to do.
Yeah, it's I feel also like the fact that we're essentially dealing with a character and a genre that's kind of about people like going to the like to these desolate part of the countries and like stealing other people's shit. Like I
this belongs in a museum or to the natives. No, in a museum.
Yeah, like it's
Thanks.
I kind of like it's still not good, but I kind of enjoyed that it's kind of upfront about that.
Yeah, like that's the thing. It's she actually navigates these worlds. Like there's a point, and I guess we'll touch upon it, where she goes to a auction. But it's like they're aware of her at that auction. She goes to these like awful billionaire auctions where people auction off whatever. It's not like she's infiltrating it as a spy. They're all like, "Oh, hey, Lara, what's up?" But anyways, let's try to navigate, like I said, the initial plot.
Yeah. So okay. So we are the story. Given that the fact that this is a film called Lara Croft Tomb Raider, is about Lara Croft, a Tomb Raider, which is not really a position that's sort of defined much beyond just sort of being an Indiana Jones alike.
Yeah, but you kind of get the feeling that whereas Indy is doing it to be like, well, we need to increase, the world's knowledge and share. She's like I'm pretty sure she's selling what she gets, right? Like
Yeah,
you really get that feeling from her.
Like, yeah, basically she's like she's a step above like Lupin the Third. um,
And she has a team. We should talk
yeah,
about this because here's the weird thing. The mansion looks exactly like I remember it from like the PS1 games. It's been a long time since I played them, and I should really revisit them. And she even has a butler that follows her around, Hillary, who's I don't know why his name is Hillary, but
well, actually, that was a historically that's always been more of a gender neutral name.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
And then some dude who's her tech guy named Bryce. And I remember when I watched this in the theaters back in the day, I had the same feeling I have now. Who is Bryce and why is he needed? This skews pretty heavily towards stuff that you would see in a Tomb Raider adventure.
It also really comes across as something you would see in a late 90s action film, regardless of tone. Like, this is basically the thing that you'd see if this was like Mindhunters, which is the Rennie Harlin, LL Cool J, Christian Slater movie about like an island full of like serial killer profilers.
Yeah,
or
you get that guy even today. He's the guy in the chair, right? Wasn't that the joke from one of the new Spider-Man movies? You have the guy in the chair, your tech guy. I guess he's just slotted in to give her somebody to talk to and to help the plot move sometimes.
Yeah. He's played by a person named Noah Taylor, who is in The Life Aquatic, and a lot of viewers may know him more famously for playing Locke, a minor villain in like the second through fourth seasons of Game of Thrones.
Yeah, and there's some other Game of Thrones actors in this number one.
Oh, yes.
There sure is. Overall, I like the cast, and it's not like an adaptation of any particular Tomb Raider game at all, but it feels like the plot of something you would see in, a 3D action adventure game from the 1990s.
Yeah, it's this like kind of hodgepodge of set pieces and weird like stuff and like backstory things and MacGuffins all kind of like haphazardly stuck together to the point where there's basically like a machine that can create time, and it doesn't it's like sitting inside like an ancient Russian like iceberg that sealed up an ancient Russian civilization, and
it's a whole thing. So I mean, every Tomb Raider game is basically the same, where she goes across the globe and has to find a magical MacGuffin that does something, and that's essentially what this is.
So Lara, her dad found this like ancient kind of container, and that the container has like a secret doohickey in it.
Right, it's the Illuminati Pyramid, and it allows you to control time. That's what the MacGuffin is. Surprise.
But the only way to actually use it is to combine it with two other MacGuffins, which are only available to you to open, as in their temples and dungeons, only open on the day of planetary alignment, which, actually, I was looking this up because I was interested in this. Apparently is not actually possible, but whatever, that's planetary alignment is very cool. The concept of all the planets in the solar system lining up into one line, which apparently can happen twice, because it literally, like, she's like, well, we have to get to the first tomb, and then we have to get to the second tomb when the second alignment happens.
Right, so the first thing she has to do, well, I think she's tipped off because she's at the house hanging out with Bryce and Hillary. Once again, Bryce, you don't get anything on this guy. Who is he? Why does he live like in a van or a camper outside of the mansion? What's his relationship to Lara? Like, are they friends? Does he work? I mean, I guess he works for her, but like, who is he? But anyways, so if I remember correctly, she gets a letter from her dad on the anniversary of her dad's death, and the letter contained a poem. Yeah? By who? Oh my gosh, why can't I remember this now?
By this point, I was kind of more focused on, like, a lot of the casting stuff and a lot of kind of the more stylistic choices. But yeah, she gets a...
It was, okay, oh no, it was a William Blake poem, and I remember because they actually repeat it a lot. It's actually a through line in the movie, you just don't think about it. It's something about grains of sand... There's something about a flower.
Because it's like really weird to think of this movie as connecting it all to classical poetry.
Yeah, but it was okay. It's a William Blake poem. I'm gonna look it up, but while I look it up, I'll explain what the connection is to the plot. In that, so she got this William Blake poem, and she's like, "Huh, why would my dad send me a William Blake poem?" And so then she goes into their massive library because they have a giant mansion, and she finds one book of poetry by William Blake and goes through it, and then she finds her dad's note to her, which I think is what sets this all off. I might be a little bit off on the order of things. And here's the poem, by the way. To see your world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wild flower, to hold infinity in the palm of your hand, an eternity in an hour. And this is about time travel and other stuff. So they repeat that poem a couple times, enough for me to remember that it existed, but not enough for me to actually, remember it.
Yeah, it's, meanwhile, dun dun dun, there is a mysterious meeting of mysterious men who are all very mysterious. And
they're very mysterious.
And of these men, one of the most shocking and evil looking, or at least more ambitious, is Powell, played by Ian Glenn, aka Ser Jorah from Game of Thrones,
Correct.
but whose acting career, whose filmography is probably more closely connected to his role as one of the main villains in the Resident Evil movies.
Yeah, he's delightful in this. He's himself. He's not like a scene stealer, I would say, at all. But when he's in, I enjoyed him.
Yeah, he is delightfully evil. Is how I would maybe describe it. He is.
You could tell because his hair's so dark.
Yeah, his hair's so dark, and it's like this weird kind of, but it's like this kind of artificial widow's peak.
Yeah, he looked video game evil. I do not recall if he's a character from the games. I feel like he's probably not.
I will kind of, this is kind of getting into something I was interested in talking about a little later, but I've only played the first of the reboot games, so, you're kind of, more gonna have to talk about more of the classic Tomb Raider, like, as an actual game experience.
I'll try, but I'll embarrass myself, and actual Tomb Raider fans will yell at me. Because, like I said, I played only the first two Tomb Raider games, and I played them actually back in, 96, 98, whenever they were out. So I have vague memories.
Yeah, so I'm getting back to it. Ian Glenn, I'm not going to call him Powell, just because it's very hard to really take a lot of these people seriously as actual characters, and that's more fun for me, is part of the Illuminati. And the Illuminati is going to try to control all of time, which is, just saying, a really big, plot thing to put in the movie that you probably wanted to have a sequel to.
Yeah, but, and they did have a sequel to it, which eventually we'll cover.
Yes. And so, basically, they have to steal the thing from Lara, so a bunch of goons try to jump into her house, and she kills a bunch of them while using bungee cords that she was using just for practice, because...
That bungee scene is so ridiculous, too. She's all like, goodbye, Hillary. I'm just gonna stay and do what I normally do every night, which is this ridiculous... That's what I'm saying. It's like what? Yeah, millionaires. They're not like us at all. Every night she goes and does a ridiculous bungee routine. I guess to stay in shape and to stay sharp, but it also seems like she just has a lot of money, man. What's she doing?
And then you have the kind of the cute scene of Hillary basically hearing gunshots and kind of nonchalantly grabbing a shotgun from his bedroom as he goes out to kill people who have just randomly broken into his boss's house.
Yeah, it's a thing. So that was that before or after she went to... the clock! We completely forgot about the clock.
The doohickey was the clock, right?
Correct. Okay, because that was independent of the letter. And once again, I'm sorry. It's been a couple days, and I'm trying to remember it. So there was a clock, and the clock started clicking. I guess.
Yes, it goes off because the actual speed of it isn't consistent, because it's moving faster in order to tell you that the date of planetary alignment is happening. So
there's a great scene that is one of my favorite things. It's so stupid, where they have the tech guy Bryce, because she's like, Bryce. She wakes him up at 5 a.m. We need you on this thing, and then so he's there meticulously taking it apart and making sure everything's in place so they can go over it. And once again, she woke this guy up at 5 a.m. And he said, I really need a coffee. And then the butler gives him a coffee, but it's a decaf. Who says they need a coffee to wake up in the morning and then gets a decaf? Like, no, he can ask for a decaf coffee, but you don't say, I need a coffee to work.
I kind of appreciate how, like, casually awful she is as a boss.
She's so terrible. Yeah, so she wakes this dude up. This whole thing, like, I think her and the butler are making fun of him for, like remembering where all the screws are. He's all like, this is so I can put it back together. And then, like, after him looking at it for like 40 minutes, she just grabs it and says, it's camouflage, and breaks it. And then just, like, pulls a magical doohickey out of it. You could have done that at the beginning. You didn't need to wake this dude up. Why? Like, that's not like a big revelation that you would have for any particular reason. You just, literally, she just got bored of him doing this the correct way and broke it. That's the only reason that could have happened.
Yeah, so after they've broken this, they realize that they have to find the two super pieces to connect, and once you connect the two, you will be able to find some kind of power, which it turns out is actually the power to control literally all of time. Okay, so yeah, she goes to Cambodia. Which is, I believe, the places where she when they actually did, like, the places where they actually did shoot. Some of the temples do kind of have tours that reference that this movie used some of these as scenery. So she goes there, but she has to start working with the mysterious or not mysterious at all, actually, the completely morally ambiguous love interest, side character, best friend who may be playing all the sides, Alex, played by...
Who is also not in the games. By a young pre-James Bond Daniel Craig. Yeah, he looked very skinny compared to how he looks now.
So I'm just gonna get ahead of this. My favorite movie of last year, Knives Out. In that film, you've seen it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, of course. Yeah, he was great in it. What's the French?
He's basically half Poirot, Detective? Half Columbo.
Yeah, he's good. I enjoy that type of character.
Yeah, except, well, the reason I've specifically mentioned this, aside from wanting to point out that we do actually watch good movies,
on occasion,
is that very famously, Craig's performance in that film uses an incredibly thick, incredibly over-the-top Foghorn Leghorn-esque Kentucky accent. One that was apparently very strongly requested to him by writer-director Rian Johnson. In the film itself, he's literally, like, they actually joke about how he sounds like Colonel Sanders. His accent in this is more ridiculous.
What I enjoy is that this movie had Angelina Jolie with a British accent and Daniel Craig with an American accent, and neither one was really great.
Yeah, Jolie's British accent really hampers the production, and I feel like if you wanted to have Jolie play Lara, they should have either ditched that or just had her not do the accent at all. It is somewhat distracting.
Yeah, I think both of them they're not like the worst, but they are a little distracting. Yeah. Like they might fall into serviceable accents if you're just really not paying attention. If this movie had gotten to the point of really engaging you, then you maybe wouldn't have noticed it. It's just that because it doesn't ever get to that point, and they're really not great accents, that, yeah.
Yeah, so Daniel Craig, who is basically just chewing his accent, like, let alone the scenery, has been hired by Ian Glenn / Powell to steal the artifact before Lara can. And so they fight over it, and then they start working together, and then they start fighting over it, and then they start working together, which is, pretty standard fare for this kind of genre, and I want to say this kind of this series too.
I want to say also, just going back to that temple. So that temple is where we find out that Daniel Craig is working for the dude. Because before that, there was the auction, which we briefly mentioned, where Lara goes to talk to, I guess, the auctioneer, who's like a museum curator, about the clock doodad, which you need to go to the Cambodian temple with to unlock the thing. And there's where you meet Daniel Craig's character, but you don't find out he's actually working for the other guy till right now. And there's apparently a history between him and Lara that's a little confrontational. I think there's a line where he literally says, The difference between me and Croft is that she does it for fun, I think, is what he said, literally, and I'm doing it for the money. To the guy. But there's also like a magical disappearing girl that I don't get. And there's another one in when they're in Siberia or wherever the hell they're at. like there's when she's trying to find the entrance to the temple, there's like a girl that talks to her that nobody sees and then she disappears. Like it's a magic girl. It's never explained and it's weird. Also there's a part where she falls down and then she's in the tomb. And my girlfriend was like, she's like, and right now that she just flashed on the top of the screen, tomb discovered. And I'm like, yeah, it was once again very video gamey. Now we found the entrance to the tomb, and we're about to start this level. It's cutscene over, time to fight a bunch of dudes.
So eventually, she and Lara and Alex are betrayed by Powell, and there's a big fight. There's a big large fight scene that I really feel, to capture the aesthetic, really should have been set to like a DMX song, and eventually, but they still managed to take the artifact. But then they're like, no, we all have to work together to find the final piece because everyone wants the final piece.
Lara goes to the top, and England's gonna be like, hey, so now we're gonna use the magical doodad that we stole from Lara in order to open the thing. But she's like, no, that's like a fake thing. That's not the real thing that we have to open. That's a decoy, more or less. And she's all like, well, you'll have to wait 5,000 years if you're wrong. And so he eventually just throws it to her. The funny thing here, by the way, is I was thinking at the time, why doesn't she just let him fail? Then everything's fine. No, it'll be 5,000 years before somebody could do this again. But the reason is, once again, because she actually wants to selfishly use this thing. She wants to find it. She could have just let him fail at that point. But anyway, so she's like on the top layer of this temple. He throws her the magical clock piece. She slots it in. And then there's this like video gamey platforming thing where she has to jump from one thing to another. I think there might be a shootout with the guys from the dude's team. I don't recall yet. Yeah. But yeah, so there's like a pendulum that goes back and forth.
There's a giant log that she, like, basically just...
It's very Tomb Raider. That part was very
this
Tomb
is the
Raider.
part where we have like a wait section because we have havoc physics, so you like walk to the end of the log and then move it to hit the other end of the log. And then a giant stone monster shows up.
Then there was an army of stone monsters. Was that before or after she defeats the first stone monster?
I believe that was afterwards. But the first stone monster summons giant stone swords out of the ground. Also, very video gamey.
Yes.
And very mummy-ish. Because there's magical green liquid in this giant bowl. Oh, the reason for riding the log is specifically so that she can puncture and break open this giant glass bowl filled with green goop, which is basically the equivalent of the black oil from the X-Files, except just for stone.
Yes, that's about right. Yeah, and so there's she has a boss fight, and then there's a cutscene where she uses the giant stone pendulum to destroy the monster. But then there are other monsters, including a stone gargoyle or griffin or something. And then there's a chase scene where she's escaping. So there's an escape sequence, once again very video gamey, where she has to run away while the temple's collapsing.
Around this point, there is an actual info dump explaining like the context of all of this, which is that there is an ancient society that worshipped a giant triangle that was made of gold that came out during planetary alignment.
Which happens once every 5,000 years. And if you don't know that it happens once every 5,000 years, it's okay, because the movie will remind you.
I'm into planetary alignment, liked it in Eternal Darkness, certainly enjoy it in here. And so but unfortunately this giant golden triangle that consistently made me think of the bad guy from Gravity Falls, was destroyed, and they decided that to make sure it could never be built again, they stuck two halves on the opposite side of the Earth, Cambodia and Russia, opposite sides. And the Illuminati were created by people who worshipped the triangle and wanted to find it in order to set about planetary alignment. And I'm gotta say, if this is the best you could do at actually getting access to this, you failed as a world-conquering secret society.
Yeah, the Illuminati is in this, but they're kind of a joke.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. how they're actually treated. So, anyways, I guess from there, I guess Lara, is this where Lara gets hurt and gets washed out to? Oh, there's a fugitive moment. That's what happens. So there's a temple escape, right? And then Daniel Craig's character Alex catches up to her, and she's all like, "What are you gonna do, Alex? Shoot me?" And he's like, "Lara, you know I'm not gonna shoot you. We have this playful antagonistic relationship." He doesn't say that, but it's inferred. So then she jumps down a waterfall like it's the fugitive.
Yes. And then after that, he's basically like taking a shower in his apartment, and he comes out and he sees the word traitor written in on Steam.
Yes, there's two things I want to. Yes, and the steam in the glass, which is the sort of thing you'd see in a horror movie, not an action movie. It was really funny. But there's two things I want to bring up with that. One is when she fell down the waterfall, whatever, recovered like in some village, some small Cambodian village with some monks. But my favorite thing is they gave her like a health potion, like a video game. Literally, she had like a bandaged arm that was bleeding, and he's all like, "Drink the tea." And she drinks the tea. He's all like, "You feel better?" And she takes it off, and she's not bleeding. I'm all like, she got a health potion.
Leon from Resident Evil 2 getting the bandage over his like police uniform.
Yeah, that was great. Two, I wanted to bring this up because you brought up the shower. I was kind of surprised for a movie from the early 2000s. Like Lara, Angelina looks like Lara, like video game Lara. Like she's a good fit for how that character looks. I'm surprised that she really, considering the time and everything, wasn't really sexualized in this movie. The most that we got was that shower scene at the beginning. And Daniel Craig had that same shower scene later, like almost shot for shot.
Which we need to point out literally ends with him. She leaves, and he says, "Well, I guess I'm going to take a cold shower now."
I mean, there's some cheeky, maybe sexist dialogue, but I'm saying actually sexualizing her as a character, not much really. Like I would have expected.
There were some male gazy shots, but that feels pretty much just in line with like movies of this era and of this kind, and which is actually kind of neat that there's not as much of it, especially since it is for a character who since like the first game has always been like a fairly major sex symbol.
Yeah, she felt surprisingly empowered in a lot of, which actually classic Lara does too, as much as of a sex symbol she is, and I mean there's some cheesy dialogue where the butler's all like, "Why don't you wear a dress like a lady?" And she's like, "I'm no lady," and you're like, but despite that, like the sentiment of her not being a lady and being able to, she's like, "Well, ladies are modest." She's all like, "I'm not a lady." Like that's like there's something almost empowering about her sexuality, which I feel like the old games did a little bit too. But it wasn't, like I said, as gazy as I thought it would be.
There's definitely a lot of like, I'm not a real woman. I'm not dainty, and I don't wear a dress because I'm cool and can do action stuff. And wow, when I actually wear a dress to my father's grave, it's such a shocking thing. But which is, it's not amazing, but like the film isn't like good enough that it actually explores these themes, so they kind of just don't really get discussed that much. Which
it's all window dressing. It's this movie. You know what I'll say about this movie? It's very superficial. Everything about it is superficial. But so anyways, continuing with the plot, they go to Russia. I think the bad guys have one side of the
and she has the other side, so they're like, "We're going to try to get it out together because we both want it out, and we're totally not going to betray each other right afterwards." Wink.
Yeah, and I think there's a firefight between her and Ian Glenn's posse.
Yes.
And then Daniel Craig's character turns on the dude who hired him to help Lara. Is that what happens?
Yes.
Right. And I have to say that there is, once again, something very video gamey and very Tomb Raider-y. And actually, this is one of the things I'm like, that looks just like something out of Rise of the Tomb Raider, where when they go to the temple in Russia, there's this, what do you call it? There's a term for these devices. But it's like a giant kind of replica of the solar system with all of the planets circling one, like a big mechanical monstrosity that she has to do some platforming on, which felt very on brand for Tomb Raider, and I liked a lot. yeah, there's one of those magical things. But yeah, so anyways, you can continue with the plot. I just wanted to bring that up because I like it a lot.
the planet replications are also like these giant like balls filled with water.
Yeah, it felt like a stupid video game thing.
So before they go to the temple, when they're in the temple, which is before they do, they meet a town of magical Siberian psychic children.
Yes, and so here's the thing: there was one of those magical children in Cambodia. Yeah. That's who she talked to before, and it had the same thing happened to one of the. It's weird. Okay,
yeah,
sorry.
So there's this inside this room filled with a constellation replicas and giant swan flask bathysphere things.
Yeah.
Basically have these these time zones where if you go inside it, it reverts to an earlier point in time before you come out. Also, very video gamey. And so they're fighting and they're trying to get control over who has the pieces. And at one point, a guy gets literally crushed to death, like the castle of Cagliostro, to continue my inexplicable Lupin the Third references. And then at one point, there's a puzzle where you have to use a laser sight to break down a wall into the component parts that then you have to reassemble into the final MacGuffin.
Yeah, skipping straight to it. So they have both sides of the triangles now. They're ready. Lara doesn't necessarily want to use it right then and there. I guess she's still waffling on whether or not she wants to use it. And so Ian Glenn shoots Daniel Craig. And she's like, haha, now you're going to have to use it or he's dead. So she does.
They run, they both jump inside the time portal made by the doohickey, where they get to a giant shadow pyramid.
Oh, we missed the entire Illuminati thing, where he presents the two pieces of the thing to the Illuminati, and there's this long, drawn-out speech of all these guys standing there talking about how it's their time, and then he just makes a finger motion for his troops to mow them all down and shoot them. I just thought that was important to mention.
It was. Who could have thought that a character played by Ian Glenn, looking like that in this point in his career, could possibly have betrayed everyone else?
Nah, but yeah, he betrayed the betrayers.
Dun, dun, dun.
He's super genius.
Yeah. So while they do that, after Lara decides to finally use the time powers to go back and save her friend, she does so, and so they try to run to the top of the shadow pyramid in his shadow dimension, and yes, I realize that I'm burying the lead on all of that. It's really hard to actually explain the context of this. Spazzy, you can back me up on this.
She has a meeting with her dad. They're running up the pyramid.
And so Ian Glenn dies. He falls off the shadow pyramid into what I guess is some kind of bottomless cliff into a bottomless pit.
Classic villain death where they can bring him back if they ever really wanted to. Except not because later.
So Lara, because she gets to the top of the pyramid, she can get what she really wants, where she talks to her father and wants him to come back, and he in his John Boyd doing a very bad British accent way, is just Lara, no, this power was not meant to be used, and it was not meant to be used for me, and you have to find your own way.
And she's like, wow, I never really thought of it that way.
So, so she instead decides to use the power to travel back about a minute before all of that happened, right when Ian Glenn has thrown the knife at Daniel Craig. By the way, very good knife skills. He doesn't even it doesn't spin. He's just whoosh.
Yeah, it's very Castlevania, man. You gotta throw it straight. Maybe he's a Belmont.
So time is all frozen, so she realizes. So what she does is she slowly, painstakingly turns the knife around horizontally, but it's so that it will still have the momentum to shoot into his chest. And that's how he dies a second time.
She turns it around. So time's frozen. It's kind of like those Quicksilver scenes in the X-Men movies, except she really had to try hard to turn it around. She really had to get that momentum around, and then it went back and killed him. And my favorite part is, at that point, any of his commandos or whatever, his mercenaries, could have easily killed her. But they said, screw this, man, our boss is dead.
And also that the entire building is coming down. Because it's a video game.
And then this is also exactly from Rise of the Tomb Raider, which is really weird. You go play Rise of the Tomb Raider, by the way. You can probably pick it up really cheap. And then, and get back to me, Wolfman. I think you'll think that some of the parallels are weird. So the main guy's all your dad was in the Illuminati, and the last thing, he begged for his life. So she goes back while the thing's collapsing to kill the guy. Which, by the way, he didn't seem that bad. Once she went back to fight him, he seemed kind of fine, even though he had a knife in him. But But yeah, that's like almost exactly what happens in Rise of the Tomb Raider, where the guy's like, "Your dad begged for his life," and then even though all this garbage is happening, she
And
goes
she
back to
still
kill the
sees
guy.
that, no, actually, all of that thing that happened was a lie, because even while he's saying that he begged for his life, they literally have the footage of him not begging for his life as he's killed.
Yeah, you have to know that he was a hero. We can't have that sort of nuance here. Um, not in
No,
Tomb Raider,
we
sir.
cannot have any indication that John Voight was not an upstanding citizen of the British Crown.
Yes.
So, after Ian Glenn is killed, I guess up to 3 times,
Yeah, three times. Third time's
she
the charm.
escapes. Alex escapes. She then decides the final thing in the movie is that she's wearing a dress, like a dress. It's
Oh
like
my
this
god.
idea. It's just like really like shown like like to be this just incredibly emotional experience that she's doing that as she walks to her dad's grave. And so, it's so crazy that Hillary the butler literally drops like a giant tray of like glass stuff.
Oh, and then I guess they set it up for more
Yeah,
adventures. She says something at the end.
no, what
Like,
happens is that after she does that, she goes in and the butler has this mysterious package for her, and she opens it up, and it's new guns.
oh, it is new guns. I do like that she uses the double guns. We didn't talk about that, but like, she's very stupid, Lara Croft. Like, because especially the original Lara Croft games were video gamey in the way that the reboot isn't. Like, she does a lot of stupid flips and gun acrobatics and stuff, and it's not gun fu. It's not John Wick, but the choreography is okay.
I would put
it's
it
not
as
the worst.
choreography that is bad but not offensive.
Yeah, it's like it's passable for the time period. It's not like it's nothing that not one action set piece
Yeah.
impressed me. But at the same time, it never offended me, and it was quick moving. That's something I really enjoyed about this movie is that it didn't let you narratively like. Yeah, there's plot holes and it's a flimsy plot. However, it was never confused you. It always made kind of an A to B sort of sense. Okay, get this MacGuffin, whatever, whatever. And with the action and everything, it moved. It was a quick moving movie.
I don't think the action was really good, but I will say, I liked some of the cinematography. Not really the indoor cinematography, but like the actual like outward like seeing the different like the river in Cambodia, or like the big like helicopter shot over the like icy like the icy terrain, and I thought that those really did look very nice.
Oh, there's also a scene, by the way. I had this written in my notes. We didn't bring it up, where Ian Glenn told Daniel Craig, "You're the Tomb Raider. You figure it out." They called him a
Does
Tomb
that count
Raider.
as lampshade hanging?
I'd count it.
So this was a film that
Oh, also in my notes, while we're here, there's a part where she says she needs to call in a favor to get to Cambodia on time, and it has a picture of her with some military dudes, I guess, but then it's really not explained how that favor came to be or how it got her to Cambodia or anything. No, it's just another
in
weird
general,
thing.
this film is like a lot of films of its time, as we've kind of talked about before. It's a film that is very like aggressively focused on trying to just really only do a couple things, and that is like fetishizing, and I mean that in a non-sexual way, not just a sexual way. Like its main character and its star, and it's just everything is this like the most cool, the most powerful, the most exciting thing in the world. This is something that like a lot of obviously we see generally in our like Hollywood movies and our kind of big vehicles, but like
Usually with male action stars too, which made this one stand out a little bit more. It's usually like Steven Seagal or somebody doing weird front
God,
flips
if
for no
Steven
reason.
Seagal was in a video game adaptation, I would ask to front track that, because I have so many so many bad stories about that man.
Steven Seagal is John Contra.
Oh, yes. Actually, this does remind me, just before we get to the note, and I realize that this is even less tangentially connected than before, but the very, very regrettable Wizard magazine, the official magazine on all of your American comic book needs, at one point did fan cast him as Forge in an X-Force movie. Do it, Sony, you cowards.
Anyway, so moving on.
Basically, like, this is an era where, like, I guess you could call it somewhat shameless in how like super aggressively focused it was on like just being not a shill for things, but just like an advertising thing for things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Like at the worst, you have something like Space Jam, and at the best, you have something maybe more close to Speed or Point Break. Actually, that's not fair. Point Break is way more interesting than this.
Like I said, the first Mummy movie is a good point.
Yeah.
This is kind of, in a lot of ways, a worse version of that.
That yeah, but and it's very and it's very focused on trying to be really cool and really like exciting. I actually wrote a note in a line in my notes that said, "Lara is cool and sexy and cool and sleeps with knives and also listens to the best mixes of 2001 and lets her weird sidekick sleep in a trailer on her mansion property."
Yeah, she even lets the nerds talk to her. By the way, in the last two movies we talked about, Mario and in Double Dragon, they did that thing where they try to appeal to gamers by including something that they consider a video game that is completely unrelated. Like in Double Dragon, it's when they were doing the car driving.
Yes.
This movie doesn't do that, except for when the operating system on Bryce's robot is totally and the interface is like Space Invaders for no reason.
Yes.
It's literally Space Invaders.
Yeah, and maybe we could see that as like an example of evolution in like the three movies we've seen, where it's like the pandering isn't really that by now; it's just sort of a weird, inexplicable Easter egg.
Yeah, and like I feel it was like when I watch this, and a lot of times it's a lot of the feelings I had with the first couple Resident Evil movies too, where I'm like, listen, it's just the original Tomb Raider games had plots, the original Resident Evils had plots, and this isn't really following those plots. It's just taking things from them. With Tomb Raider, I feel like it's a little bit more forgivable because every adventure Lara has is just like a different adventure for a different magical MacGuffin. Sure, the characters besides her and the butler weren't from the games, but like it felt like this could more or less be the plot of a video game. Like, you know,
Yeah,
like,
I'm actually kind of a fan of those Resident Evil movies, and I kind of actually like the fact that they do their own thing. But I also do recognize the fact that like when you want to get a movie like based on this thing you love, you do probably want it to be like, you know, it to have it be the things that you know, and you don't
right
really
instead of being something else with the window dressings of the things you know.
Yeah, and like we'll get to that when we get to that.
We'll get
I'm
to
excited.
those movies for sure. We will 100% get
Yeah.
to. I don't know if we're ever going to finish all those Resident Evil movies.
We
There's
will.
So many of them.
Yeah, but we won't do them like as a row. We'll have to split them up because
there's a lot of them.
but we are absolutely gonna at least hit Resident Evil Retribution because I like that one. That's my favorite of them.
All right, but back to Tomb Raider. I was just using that as a comparison
Yeah,
point.
but the thing is, like, it doesn't really need to combine a plot because in the end, like, pretty much all. I mean, I know that some of the games feed into each other. I know the reboot series does feed into,
especially.
Yeah, but like, I don't necessarily think that's as necessary.
You know, I said Indiana Jones before, and I said James Bond before, and like for Bond, they're actually, take a lot of the old books and made them into movies. But then they were able to make movies that just featured Bond because the character has a clear through point. And I think the same is true of Lara. You just put her in a situation where she has to go do some archaeology stuff and find some things and shoot her double guns and do flips.
Yeah,
as long as you nail the character of Lara, you nail Tomb Raider.
Tomb Raider, I think, opens it up to like less serialization than other series.
Yeah, and more independent adventures. It's very
and that is honestly perfectly fine of a thing to do. Like I don't think there's really anything bad about having mostly independent adventures and with maybe at most light serialization sprinkled on it. And to be honest, it is kind of nice because like obviously we didn't want to watch a Double Dragon sequel anyway, but we definitely didn't want to watch a Double Dragon sequel where Robert Patrick was in court, right?
Yeah, exactly. And this movie could have done that. It could have set up a different adventure with her and still had the Illuminati in the background and set up a sequel where she has to find the treasure her father was talking about and like set it up for a 3-movie arc. But it's like, no, this is the adventure we're getting it done with. She's already established as a Tomb Raider. Like, this is already what she does. She already has all these skills. It's like being thrown into a Batman movie where he's already Batman as opposed to Batman Begins. It's like,
Yeah.
no, man, he's Batman. It's like no, Keaton's Batman. He's been doing this for a little while. He has the skills. People know who he is.
This is something that that like was also kind of tied to this piece. Like, there were absolutely like film franchises in the past that were explicitly meant to be film franchises and were planned out multiple films with like multiple films in advance. Like the original Superman 1 and 2 were like from the beginning planned to be a two-parter. There was also this period where like there wasn't really an idea that you needed to plan out a larger series. You would just do a movie, and if it was successful, then you'd just do another movie if there was interest by like the main creative staff, and that's all you needed. And I kind of like that, honestly. Like I kind of like the fact that this movie sets up the possibility of other adventures, but doesn't really try to but still actually concludes. Like, it's not a good story, but it actually does conclude its story.
Yeah, it's like, here's an adventure, it's done. It's like, yeah, it's basically like an episode. Like, this could have been a 2-part pilot for a Tomb Raider TV show.
Yeah.
That has its weekly episodes, and every time she goes on a different adventure. Which, by the way, Tomb Raider is very much set up for, and I would have loved that. And that alternate universe where they do a weekly Hercules and Xena style Tomb Raider adventure.
Oh, Lara would have been absolutely perfect for those, like, Sam Raimi New Zealand shows.
Oh, like, yeah, right?
Like, you could totally see, like, this night, Tomb Raider, just after Jack of all trades.
Cleopatra 2020, or whatever that was.
Yeah. You basically have, okay, here is, like, an area that doesn't really cost that much to shoot in, and it looks very pretty. God, now that's very exciting. Kind of a lot more than this movie,
right.
But...
That's... And I actually kind of feel like if with them turning so many properties into TV shows, I feel like more than another Tomb Raider film, I would love like a Netflix show or something, and do it like in the style of The Witcher, which is glossy, kind of high budget, but still very much episodic and not serialized. Yeah, there's 3 points. There's characters. There's plots, but you go and I think with The Witcher and The Mandalorian, there's been a little bit of a return to that where, hey, it's fine if you go on an adventure. I think that's the future I would prefer for Tomb Raider in live action as opposed to more movies.
I also think that like that kind of like
you also don't need huge set pieces and special effects for Tomb Raider. Like, every now and then she fights some dinosaurs or mummies or something, but it's not, it's not something where you need, like, to dump a $250 million budget every time.
Yeah, there's not really a part where Lara has to like, team up with an MMA star to fight an Imperial Walker.
Yeah, exactly.
But actually, this did make me think, and I'm only saying this because I literally just found about this last night, is that, what I would actually, for some reason now the introduction that I want to see is something called the WMAC Masters, which was sort of like a Mortal Kombat ripoff fake reality show that was produced by
Is that
4
the one
kids.
with Bruce Lee's daughter?
Yes, that was the one where Bruce Lee's daughter, Shannon Lee, is the announcer. Like I said, it was produced by the people by 4 Kids, the regrettable anime dubbing company, and it featured in one very short role Timac from The Last Dragon.
Huh. Speaking of Last Dragon, Mortal Kombat's coming up soon.
Oh, which one? The movie or just... Yeah.
Well, we're going to do the movie, which is... yeah, whatever.
I am so excited. I love that movie. Legit.
Me too.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. It's been a while. It's been over an hour. Yeah. So, final thoughts. You kind of gave yours, but see if you can just kind of sum it up.
This is interesting to me because, like, this may not be the film that did this first, because obviously we didn't watch all of the adaptations. We're not doing this fully chronologically because we're just kind of more interested in bouncing around. But, like, at least this era seems to be the moment where, like, a lot of these video game adaptations are going from being, like, video games as these, like, super nerdy, obsessive things that you have to put tons of weird nerd crap into. Like, weird sci-fi dystopias or whatever. And... like, it just kind of moves it out into being just, like, more generic, but respectable, like, light popcorn flair. And eventually we're slowly gonna get stuff that's tries to be better than that. But in general,
comic book movies were kind of at the same place here.
I would say comic book movies are more at the same place like a decade or two beforehand. Like,
well, because I mean, you have the Batman movies, but
yeah,
those kind of stand apart. It's really, I feel like, the X-Men movies, which were around this time,
that makes sense.
kind of started legitimizing comic books as a medium in film. But video games never had that. You kept having things that, and like this was actually, I feel like, the closest that they'd gotten. This, and then Resident Evil, and maybe even a little bit of Prince of Persia, which we'll get into all of those.
I mean, I really like Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter, which came out years before this, but like those were unabashedly video game movies, and goofy ones at that. Like,
exactly. And so video games at this point were lagging behind, I feel like, where comic books were, but then they never got their kind of Nolan Batman trilogy. Hey, these can actually be film.
Yeah, they never managed...
and they never got their MCU breaking through to the mainstream either, because I feel like those are the two separate things that made comic book movies like, oh, anyone can watch them, because MCU made them kind of super mainstream and normalized them, and the Batman movies kind of legitimized them, and video games never got either of those things.
Yeah, like and comics had like outliers before that, but like
your Blades and your whatever.
Yeah, but like it's like I was also thinking of like the Superman movies, but even those are like not even really comic book movies so much as they're kind of like closer to like The Godfather.
Yeah, and Superman kind of transcends that just as his iconography, but you know, I digress. We both digress with that. Yeah,
when I some point down, I hope to maybe discuss my grand unifying theory of The Godfather, Superman the movie, and Popeye the movie. Basically, this is a film that is not great. I obviously didn't really take to it as positively as you did, Spazzy, but it is really interesting to me to see like an example of like video games being used basically just as like sheet material for adaptations, but not defined by the fact that they're video games.
Yeah, and I mean, once again, I like this a little bit than more than you did. I know that you're like, this was not a good movie, and I don't know if I disagree with that fact. I'm not ready to say this is a good movie, but I'll definitely say that it's fine. It's like, if you like kind of cheesy, straightforward action movies, you could do worse. There's nothing offensive about it.
Yeah.
I like how it adapts certain video game-y concepts. And it doesn't do it in a way that's making fun of the genre or making fun of people that like video games. It's just like I said, like health potions, like having a boss fight, having different level structures. Like, hey, like I said, here's the sand level, here's the ice level, here's whatever. You know, and it was fine. You know, the actions, whatever. But I've definitely seen worse movies. This is a sort of movie that I don't think I'm gonna seek out to watch it again. But if somebody was like, if it was on TV, maybe I'd watch some parts of it. Like, it's not terrible.
if an online friend is doing a live showing, which I do a lot, and someone wants to do Tomb Raider, I would watch it. I mean, admittedly, like, I'll watch pretty much almost anything that one of my friends wants to put on, but I wouldn't dread that in the way I dreaded other things. So it's interesting, this film, I think. We'd agree?
Yeah, I'd say so. The film is, I mean, at least as a part of video game history, if you're interested in video game movies, I would say to give this movie a go, for sure. Like, you know, it's not a complete waste of your time. It can show you where kind of action movies in general, and video game movies in particular, were at this point in time. If you're a Tomb Raider fan, I feel like there's some stuff for you to like. If you're a Tomb Raider mega fan, there's definitely some stuff for you to hate, because you're like, this thing isn't like this thing. But you know, that's fandom for you.
Yes, yeah, it's it gets at the spirit of it, which is honestly sometimes better than being an adaptation of direct things. But yeah, so like I said this at the beginning, we needed this. We needed something that was not Double Dragon.
Yeah, a little bit of a palate cleanser. And like I said, I legitimately enjoyed it. I don't know if a lot of it might be just because I like Tomb Raider. And it was like a fun little watch though. It wasn't great, but meh. Next time, I think next time we might. We're waffling. Maybe if anybody, we don't get many comments on these videos, but if anybody has a suggestion,
Which is fine. Yeah.
we'll do that. I think we're thinking of either maybe completing all 3 Tomb Raider movies because there aren't too many of them,
Yeah.
or perhaps going to Mortal Kombat, maybe something else. I don't know, but we enjoy these. We hope that the listeners out there enjoy them as well.
Yeah. So thank you all for listening.
Yeah. Bring it back to the source, as we like to say. You can follow me at 8bit_Spazzy. What's your Twitter handle, Wolfman?
Wolfman Jew.
All right, guys. Well, this was fun, and till next time.